Happy Saturday, y'all. Here with you. I always forget what day it is. First week of December. I waited until dark to do my recording, so it took me like half an hour to get the light right in the room, but we're gonna try. Putting on some fuzzy socks because it's cold outside. And today we're gonna continue our Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents series. Last week we did the introduction. I obviously was not prepared since I said it was chapter 1 and then proceeded to read the introduction to you guys. So we're gonna go over chapter 1. If you haven't checked out our site, please do so, www.findingyourselfsatx.com. And if you're not a client and you'd like to be a client, or you're not sure you're interested, connect with us. Our first consult is always free. So I'll put on my old lady glasses and I'll get started reading with y'all. I hope that you picked up your own copy. Again, this is Lindsay Gibson's work, and we'll be going over chapter 1 today of Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. Chapter 1. How emotionally immature parents affect their adult children's lives. Emotional loneliness comes from not having enough emotional intimacy with other people. It can start in childhood due to feeling emotionally unseen by self-preoccupied parents, or it can arise in adulthood when an emotional connection is lost. If it's been a lifelong feeling, it points to the likelihood of not being sufficiently emotionally responded to as a child. Growing up in a family with emotionally immature parents is a lonely experience. These parents may look and act perfectly normal, caring for their child's physical health and providing meals and safety. However, if they don't make a solid emotional connection with their child, the child will have a gaping hole where true security might have been. The loneliness of feeling unseen by others is as fundamental a pain as physical injury, but it doesn't show on the outside. Emotional loneliness is a vague and private experience, not easy to see or describe. You might call it a feeling of emptiness or being alone in the world. Some people have called this feeling existential loneliness. But there is nothing existential about it. If you feel it, it came from your family. Children have no way of identifying a lack of emotional intimacy in their relationship with a partner. In their relationship with a parent. It isn't a concept they have. And it's even less likely that they can understand that their parents are emotionally immature. All they have is a gut feeling of emptiness, which is how a child experiences loneliness. With a mature parent, the child's remedy for loneliness is simply to go to the parent for affectionate connection. But if your parent was scared of deep feelings, you might have been left with an uneasy sense of shame for needing comforting. When the children of emotionally immature parents grow up, the core emptiness remains, even if they have a superficially normal adult life. Their loneliness can continue into adulthood if they unwittingly choose relationships that can't give them enough emotional connection. They may go to school, work, marry, and raise children, but all the while, they'll still be haunted by that core sense of emotional isolation. In this chapter, we'll look at people's experience of emotional loneliness, along with how self-awareness helped them understand what they were missing and how to change. Emotional intimacy. Emotional intimacy involves knowing that you have someone you can tell anything to, someone to go to with all your feelings about anything and everything. You'll feel completely safe opening up to the other person, whether in the form of words, through an exchange of looks, or by just being together quietly in a state of connection. Emotional intimacy is profoundly fulfilling, creating a sense of being seen for who you really are. It can only exist when the other person seeks to know you, not judge you. As children, the basis for our security is emotional connection with our caretakers. Emotionally engaged parents make children feel that they always have someone to go to. This kind of security requires genuine emotional interactions with parents. Parents who are emotionally mature engage in this level of emotional connection almost all the time. They've developed enough self-awareness to be comfortable with their own feelings as well as those of other people. More importantly, they're emotionally attuned to their children, noticing their children's moods and welcoming their feelings with interest. A child feels safe connecting with such a parent, whether seeking comfort or sharing enthusiasm. Mature parents make their children feel that they enjoy engaging with them and that it's fine to talk about emotional issues. These parents have a lively, balanced emotional life and are usually consistent in their attentiveness and interest toward their children. They are emotionally dependable. Emotional loneliness. Parents who are emotionally immature, on the other hand, are so self-preoccupied that they don't notice their children's inner experiences. In addition, they discount feelings and they fear emotional intimacy. They're uncomfortable with their own emotional needs and therefore have no idea how to offer support at an emotional level. Such parents may even become nervous and angry if their children get upset, punishing them instead of comforting them. These reactions shut down children's instinctive urge to reach out, closing the door to emotional contact. If one or both of your parents weren't mature enough to give you emotional support, as a child, you would have felt the effects of not having it, but you wouldn't necessarily have known what was wrong. You might have thought that feeling empty and alone was your own private, strange experience, something that made you different from other people. As a child, you had no way of knowing that this hollow feeling is a normal, universal response to lacking adequate human companionship. Emotional loneliness is a term that suggests its own cure, being on the receiving end of another person's sympathetic interest in what you're feeling. This type of loneliness isn't an odd or senseless feeling. It's the predictable result of growing up without sufficient empathy from others. To round out this description of emotional loneliness, let's look at two people who vividly remembered this feeling from childhood and describe it well. Yes, I'm drinking out of a silly cup because of my kid. Mostly everything I do in my life revolves around my child. I think all of you who are parents probably feel the same way. David's story. Here's how my client David responded when I commented that growing up in his family sounded lonely. It was incredibly lonely, like I was utterly isolated. It was a fact of my existence. It just felt normal. In my family, everyone was separate from each other and we were all emotionally isolated. We lived parallel lives with no points of contact. In high school, I used to get this image of floating in the ocean with no one around me. That's how it felt at home. When I asked him more about the feeling of loneliness, he said, "It was a sensation of emptiness and nothingness. I had no way of knowing that most people didn't feel that way. That feeling was just daily life for me." Rhonda's story. Rhonda remembered a similar aloneness when she was 7 years old, standing by the moving truck outside her family's old house with her parents and 3 older siblings. Although she was technically with her family, no one was touching her and she felt totally alone. I was standing there with my family, but nobody had really explained what this move would mean. I felt totally alone, trying to figure out what was going on. I was with my family, but I didn't feel like I was with them. I remember feeling exhausted, wondering how was I going to deal with this on my own. I didn't feel like I could ask any questions. They were totally unavailable to me. I was too anxious to share anything with them. I knew it was on me to cope with this alone. The message within emotional loneliness. This kind of emotional pain and loneliness is actually a healthy message. The anxiety felt by David and Rhonda was letting them know that they were in dire need of emotional contact, but because their parents didn't notice how they felt, all they could do was keep their feelings inside. Fortunately, once you start listening to your own emotions instead of shutting them down, they will guide you toward an authentic connection with others. Knowing the cause of your emotional loneliness is the first step toward finding more fulfilling relationships. How children cope with emotional loneliness. Emotional loneliness is so distressing that a child who experiences it will do whatever is necessary to make some kind of connection with the parent. These children may learn to put other people's needs first as the price of admission to a relationship. Instead of expecting others to provide support or show interest in them, they may take on the role of helping others, convincing everyone that they have few emotional needs of their own. Unfortunately, this tends to create even more loneliness, since covering up your deepest needs prevents genuine connection with others. Lacking adequate parental support or connection, many emotionally deprived children are eager to leave childhood behind. They perceive that the best solution is to grow up quickly and become self-sufficient. These children become competent beyond their years, but lonely at their core. They often jump into adulthood prematurely, getting jobs as soon as they can, becoming sexually active, marrying early, or joining the service. It's as though they're saying, since I'm already taking care of myself, I might as well go ahead and get the benefits of growing up fast. They look forward to adulthood, believing it offers freedom and a chance to belong. Sadly, in their rush to leave home, they may end up marrying the wrong person, tolerating exploitation, or staying with a job that takes more than it gives. They often settle for emotional loneliness in their relationships because it feels normal to them, like their early home life. Why the past repeats itself. If the lack of emotional connection with emotionally immature parents is so painful, why do so many people end up in similarly frustrating relationships in adulthood? The most primitive parts of our brain tell us that safety lies in familiarity. Bowlby, 1979. We gravitate to situations we have experience with because we know how to deal with them. As children, we don't recognize our parents' limitations because seeing our parents as immature or flawed is frightening. Unfortunately, by denying the painful truth about our parents, we aren't able to recognize similarly hurtful people in future relationships. Denial makes us repeat the same situation over and over because we never see it coming the next time. Sophie's story illustrates this dynamic well. Sophie's story. Sophie had been dating Jerry for 5 years. She had a great job as a nurse and felt lucky to have a long-term relationship. At 32, she wanted to get married, but Jerry was in no hurry. In his mind, everything was fine the way it was. He was a fun guy, but he didn't seem to want emotional intimacy and usually closed down when Sophie brought up emotional topics. Sophie was feeling deeply frustrated and sought therapy for help in figuring out what to do. It was a difficult dilemma. She loved Jerry, but she was running out of time to start a family. She also felt guilty and worried that she was asking for too much. One day, Jerry suggested that they go to the restaurant they had gone to on their first date. There was something about the way he asked that made Sophie wonder if he might propose. Sophie barely made it through dinner, trying to contain her excitement. Sure enough, after dinner, Jerry pulled a small jewelry box out of his jacket pocket. As he pushed it across the linen tablecloth, Sophie could hardly breathe. But when she opened the box, there was no ring, only a small square of paper with a question mark on it. She didn't understand. Jerry grinned at her. "Now you can tell your friends I finally popped the question." "Are you proposing?" she asked in confusion. "No, it's a joke. Get it?" Sophie was shocked, furious, and deeply hurt. When she called her mother and told her about the incident, her mother actually sided with Jerry, telling Sophie it was a funny joke and she shouldn't be mad. I honestly cannot think of a single situation where this would be a good joke in a relationship. It's too deflating and demeaning. But as Sophie recognized later, her mother and Jerry had a lot in common in their insensitivity to people's feelings. Every time Sophie tried to tell them how she felt, she ended up feeling invalidated. In therapy, Sophie began to see the parallels between her mother's lack of empathy and Jerry's emotional insensitivity. She realized that in her relationship with Jerry, she had re-entered the emotional loneliness she'd felt as a child. She now saw that her frustration with Jerry's emotional unavailability wasn't something new. It was as old as her childhood. Sophie had felt that sense of unconnectedness her whole life. Now, I hope that you all are reading along with your own copy of your book. Also, as you have insights, or even if you're just listening, hopefully you have a journal and you can relate how this, if it aligns to stuff that has happened in your life, maybe write that down, right? How has your life been? Hopefully you've never experienced this and you were just curious and clicked on the button, right? But if it has affected you, it's good to write about it and begin the process of validation, even if it's just a journal entry from you to you. And then later when you read it, you can validate yourself. Feeling guilty for being unhappy. I have a special place in my heart for people like Sophie, who function so well that other people think they have no problems. In fact, their competence makes it hard for them to take their own pain seriously. I have it all, they're likely to say. I should be happy. Why do I feel so miserable? This is the classic confusion of a person whose physical needs were met in childhood while emotional needs remain unfulfilled. People like Sophie often feel guilty for complaining. Men and women alike will list the things they have to be thankful for, as if their life were an addition problem whose positive sum means nothing can be wrong. But they can't shake the feeling of being fundamentally alone and lacking the level of emotional intimacy they crave in their closest relationships. By the time they come to see me, some of them are either ready to leave their partner or are involved in an affair that gives them some of what they need. Others have avoided romantic relationships altogether, seeing emotional commitment as a trap they prefer to stay out of. Still others have decided to stay in their relationship for the children and come to therapy for help in learning how to be less angry and resentful. And of course, every time I say I, it's in the voice of Lindsay. Few of these people walk into my office with the thought that their lack of satisfying emotional intimacy started in childhood. They are usually mystified as to how they ended up in a life that doesn't make them happy. They struggle with feelings of selfishness for wanting something more out of life. As Sophie initially said, relationships are always going to have frustrations. It's work, right? She was partly right. Good relationships do take some effort and forbearance, but it shouldn't take work just to be noticed. Making an emotional connection ought to be the easy part. Emotional loneliness transcends gender. I think my last video was 15 minutes, and I said it's probably going to be an hour. So if you guys are still with me, I appreciate you being with me. Okay, we got a few more pages. We got 10 more pages, so I imagine this video will be about an hour long in total. That's the benefit of YouTube, right? You can pause and come back whenever you're ready. Emotional loneliness transcends gender. Although women still outnumber men in seeking psychotherapy, I've worked with many men who have faced the same issue of feeling lonely in their primary relationship. In some ways, it's even more poignant for them because our culture maintains that males have fewer emotional needs. But taking a look at the rates of suicide and violence reveals that this isn't true. Men are more likely to become violent or succeed at suicide when they feel emotionally anguished. Men who lack emotional intimacy, a sense of belonging, or caring attention can feel as empty as anybody else, though they may resist showing it. Emotional connection is a basic human need, regardless of gender. Children who feel they cannot engage their parents emotionally often try to strengthen their connection by playing whatever roles they believe their parents want them to. Although this may win them some fleeting approval, it doesn't yield genuine emotional closeness. Emotionally disconnected parents don't suddenly develop a capacity for empathy just because a child does something to please them. People who lacked emotional engagement in childhood, men and women alike, often can't believe that someone would want to have a relationship with them just because of who they are. They believe that if they want closeness, they must play a role that always puts the other person first. Jake's story. Jake had recently married Kayla, a bubbly woman who made him feel genuinely loved. He was happy when he got married, but now he couldn't shake a feeling of being very down in the dumps. I should be happy, he said. I'm the luckiest guy in the world, and I'm trying hard to be the person she wants me to be, but I feel like I'm acting, forcing myself to be more upbeat than I really am. I hate feeling like I'm faking it. I asked Jake who he thought he should be with Kayla. I should be a person who is super happy, like she is. I need to make her feel loved and keep her happy. That's the way it's supposed to be. He looked at me expectantly for confirmation. But when I just waited, he went on. When she comes home from work, I try hard to act really happy and excited, but it's more than I'm really feeling. I'm exhausted. I asked him what he thought would happen if he were to honestly tell Kayla about the strain he felt, and he said she would be devastated and furious if I tried to talk to her about it. I told Jake that I believed sharing his honest feelings might have enraged someone in his past, but it didn't sound like how Kayla would respond. It sounded more like what he had told me about his angry mother, who was quick to blow up if people didn't do what she wanted. Jake's secure relationship with Kayla was tempting him to relax and be himself, but he was sure that his relationship would suffer if he stopped trying so hard. When I told Jake that maybe this safe new relationship was giving him a chance to finally be loved for himself, he was uncomfortable with the reference to his emotional needs. He looked embarrassed and said, "When you say it like that, I sound pitiful and needy." During childhood, Jake had gotten the message from his mother that showing any emotional needs meant he was weak. Furthermore, if he didn't act how she wanted him to, he felt inadequate and unlovable. Jake was eventually able to understand his feelings and become more genuine with Kayla, who totally accepted him. But she was astounded by how much anger toward his mother, but he was astounded by how much anger toward his mother we'd unearthed. "I can't believe how much I hated her," he said. What Jake didn't realize is that hate is a normal and involuntary reaction when someone tries to control you for no good reason. It signals that the person is extinguishing your emotional life force by getting his or her needs met at your expense. Feeling trapped in taking care of parents. It isn't only in romantic relationships that people may feel deep emotional loneliness. I've worked with single people who have similar stories, but their unhappy adult relationships are played out with parents or friends. Typically, their relationships with their parents are so draining that they don't have the emotional energy to pursue romantic relationships, nor do they want to. Their experiences with their parents have taught them that relationships mean feeling abandoned and burdened at the same time. To these people, relationships feel like traps. They already have their hands full with the parent who acts like he or she owns them. Luisa's story. Louise, a single school teacher in her late 20s, felt completely dominated by her controlling mother, a gruff ex-policewoman who expected Louise to live with her and take care of her. Her demands were so excessive that Louise started having suicidal thoughts. Louisa's therapist told her in no uncertain terms that her life depended on getting away from her mother's control. When Louise told her mother she was leaving, her mother said, "That's not going to happen. You'd feel awful about yourself. Besides, I can't get along without you." Fortunately, Louise summoned the strength to establish her own independent life. In the process, she discovered that guilt was a manageable emotion and a small price to pay for her freedom. Not trusting your instincts. Emotionally immature parents don't know how to validate their child's feelings and instincts. Without this validation, children learn to give in to what others seem sure about. As adults, they may deny their instincts to the point where they acquiesce to relationships they don't really want. They may then believe it's up to them to make the relationship work. They may rationalize why they have to try so hard in the relationship, as though it were normal to struggle daily to get along with your mate. While effort is needed to maintain communication and connection in a relationship, it shouldn't feel like constant, unrewarding work. The truth is, if both partners fit each other, understand each other's feelings, and are positive and supportive, relationships are primarily pleasurable, not arduous. It isn't asking too much to generally feel happy when you see your partner or look forward to time together. When people say, you can't have everything, they're really saying they don't have what they need. As a human being, you can trust yourself to know when you're emotionally satisfied. You know when you've been given full measure. You aren't a bottomless pit of ceaseless demands. You can trust the inner prompts that tell you when something is missing. But if you've been trained to discount your feelings, you'll feel guilty for complaining if everything looks okay on the outside. If you have a place to live, a regular paycheck, enough food, and a partner or friends, conventional wisdom says, how bad can it be? Many people can readily enumerate all the reasons why they should be satisfied and be shy about admitting that they aren't. They blame themselves for not having the right feelings. Megan's story. Hold on, let me drink water. Megan broke up with her boyfriend twice before getting pregnant in her first year of college. Although her boyfriend wanted to get married, the relationship just didn't feel right to her. However, her parents were crazy about her boyfriend, who came from a wealthy family, and pushed her to marry him, especially with a baby on the way. And Megan gave in. Her husband became a successful real estate broker, adding to his appeal for her parents. Years later, with three children, finally in college, she was ready to end her marriage, but she felt confused and guilty about wanting to leave. In our first session, Megan said, I don't know how to express myself. Neither her husband nor her parents could understand why she wasn't satisfied with the way things were, and she couldn't find the words to defend her feelings. For every explanation she stumbled through, they countered with several reasons why she was wrong. They discounted her reasons because her complaints were emotional, like not being listened to, having her feelings and requests disregarded, and not having any fun with her husband. She tried to explain to them that she and her husband weren't compatible socially, sexually, or in their activities. Megan's real problem wasn't that she didn't know how to express herself. It was that her family didn't want to hear her. Her husband and parents weren't trying to understand. They were focused on trying to convince her she was mistaken. Megan felt embarrassed and guilty because her emotional needs were outweighing her vows and commitments. But as I pointed out to her, vows and promises aren't the fuel relationships run on. Relationships are sustained by the pleasure of emotional intimacy. This feeling that someone is interested in taking the time to really listen and understand your experience. If you don't have that, your relationship won't thrive. Mutual emotional responsiveness is the single most essential ingredient of human relationships. Megan feared that she was a bad person for wanting to leave her husband. When people can no longer tolerate an emotionally unrewarding relationship, how should we characterize their desire to leave? Are they being selfish, impulsive, or hard-hearted? Are they giving up prematurely, or perhaps just plain immoral? If they've taken it all this time, why can't they take it a little more? Why rock the boat? The point might exactly be that they have taken it for so long. Perhaps they've literally used up all the energy they had to give, like Megan, who had spent years trying to give her husband and parents what they expected. Megan had repeatedly tried to explain her feelings and tell them how unhappy she was. She even tried to get through to her husband by leaving him letters to read. But neither he nor her parents listened. Instead, they responded with what they wanted her to do, the classic egocentric response of emotionally immature people. Fortunately, Megan finally began to take her own feelings seriously and quit letting her husband and parents deny her emotional needs with arguments that were emotionally irrelevant to her. When Megan finally realized that what she wanted from a relationship, when Megan finally realized what she really wanted from a relationship, she shyly told me, I want to matter the most to someone. I want someone to want to be with me. Then she looked confused and said, Is that too much to ask? I really don't know. Since childhood, Megan had been trained to think that her natural desire to feel special and loved was selfish. Throughout her marriage, her husband reinforced this by telling her that she wanted too much and her expectations were too high, until she stopped believing that he knew more about her than she did. Lacking self-confidence due to parental rejection. For those of you following along, we're on page 19. When parents reject or emotionally neglect their children, those children often grow up to expect the same from other people. They lack confidence that others could be interested in them, instead of asking for what they want. Their low self-confidence makes them shy and conflicted about seeking attention. They're convinced they would be bothering others if they tried to make their needs known. Unfortunately, by expecting past rejection to repeat itself, these children end up stifling themselves and promoting more emotional loneliness. In this situation, people create their own emotional loneliness by hanging back instead of interacting. As a therapist, my job is to help them realize how their parents have damaged their self-confidence, while also encouraging them to tolerate the anxiety of trying something new in order to connect more with others. As the next two stories show, people are capable of doing this. It just may not occur to them to reach out because they simply don't have much experience with other people helping them feel better. I should have grabbed 2 cups of water. I'm going to go get another one. I will be right back. Okay. If you guys are still with me, you get an A for effort.